meeting. But before going to that, we will open the public forum. So any member of the public who would like to speak to the board. Former Councilor Sharon Busher is here with us in person tonight, not just a disembodied voice on Zoom. She's with us. Welcome,
the
Sharon.
occasion is my phone isn't working. So I'm having difficulty zooming in. So, and I felt I wanted to come to speak in strong support of the two items that you have on the agenda. Before the meeting, I thanked the fire chief for the proposal for the response, the overdose response team pilot, and I think it's a measured response, and I think it's a welcomed response. And I think that the community also really has confidence in the fire department because you're not the enforcement department. And I think that that issue is still difficult for our community. And so I think that this is a really good pilot, and I hope it's successful. And I'm hoping that actually it will continue after you evaluate it. And I understand and I appreciate the evaluation and the concern about redundancy of resources, and I don't want to waste money either. But when I spoke to the fact of the community's confidence, I think that really needs to be it needs to be evaluated in that equation. So that's my phone, and I apologize.
Seems like it's working.
Things never change. Anyway, so the second thing has to do with the warming shelter, and I'm so thankful that you were able to find a place to house people that are in need of protection from our cold climate. So I support this, but I have some questions. The timeline, December 15th to March 15th, is good, but we know that our climate gets colder before December 15th. And I know it must be resources that are part of the obstacle, but I really wondered if you could move that up and have that open earlier. I know what I'm asking, and I see that the CETO director is here, Brian Pine is here, but I was hoping maybe November 15th, but maybe if that's unrealistic, maybe December 1st or whatever you can do to beat that opening of December 15th. I think that's really important. The second piece had to do with the fact that you offer a meal, an evening meal, which is good. And then I read that there was going to be some type of snack before the people, because they can enter at 5 at night and have to leave by 8 in the morning, some kind of morning snack. And I wondered if you could consider, with food insecurity the way it is, you could consider offering breakfast. I'm not talking about scrambled eggs and waffles. I'm talking about maybe a big pot of oatmeal with some raisins and brown sugar. And so they would have some warmth before they go out into the day, which is going to be cold also. And I realize there are places that are open during the day for them to seek shelter, but not everyone does that. We know that's a matter of choice. So I'm here to speak in support, but to also bring forward some maybe challenges to see if you can do a little bit more. And I know that's a big ask, but thank you so much for hearing my comments.
Sharon, thank you. Thanks for coming and joining us tonight. And your comments. Are there any? I do not see anyone else in the room here to speak to the board. Is anyone else online?
If you're online, you can raise your hand.
Okay. Does look like there's at least one attendee online, but we do not see a raised hand. So I am going to close the public forum. And we will move to those two deliberative items. The first is 3.1, Burlington Fire Department Community Response Team. Joined tonight by Chief LaChance, who has personally put a great deal of effort and thought into this concept, working with the Firefighters Association. I see we have Kyle Blake here as well. Appreciate your being here and your support of this initiative. Burlington has been on the cutting edge of responding to this drug crisis for years now. We have tried many new initiatives, and we need to keep, as this crisis evolves and changes and deepens, it's clear that we need to keep changing our response. And I really appreciate Chief LaChance responding to that challenge and coming forward with a concept that potentially has a lot of benefits to it, both life-saving benefits for people who are overdosing in this community, new supports for the public, the city workers who are being impacted by this burgeoning challenge right now. And I appreciate the thought that's gone into how to make this a maximally effective team and how to get it started quickly. So with that, Chief, I'll hand over to you to do whatever you want to kick this off.
Thank you. So yeah, this began as a conversation from the ground up at the fire department. I think everybody is looking for solutions, not only to the ever increasing call volume at the fire department, but to our community's needs. We do have employees with a real heart to truly help folks. And like I've said before, if you want to demotivate a firefighter, allow them to feel like what they're doing isn't making a difference. And sometimes this cycle of that we're in of overdose or unresponsiveness right to the hospital and back is really a struggle. So I have folks come to me and say, listen, Chief, put me in the UTV. Of course, it was summertime then, the UTV doesn't have heat, so we're going to use a pickup truck now. But and let us just go out there and let us run these unresponsives and run these overdoses really, and do some outreach in the community. So we came up with this plan. I sent it to the mayor maybe 3.5 weeks ago. So we haven't been wasting any time to do this. And I really appreciate you guys hearing this tonight at this special meeting. I know Brian had an agenda item, so I appreciate you fitting this in. This will be a overtime 6-month pilot. It will be overtime paid to current staff. We're not going to be hiring any new staff for this pilot. That being said, it is voluntary overtime only. We do have minimum staffing requirements already that we cover with overtime. We're covering overtime in the dispatch center, and now we have this. So the firefighters are working a lot of hours. So I do plan to be very thoughtful of them, and I want to use their time and honestly the finances that are afforded to us to the maximum capacity. So this purposefully is a plan with low guardrails. I want our folks to be out in the community. I want them to be giving feedback on what they're finding. I want them to tell me, hey, Chief, we don't need to be out here this time to this time. This time to this time would be better. Like, it's going to be a real interactive, like, moving and shaking kind of pilot to not be down this narrow road of rules, really. Because I think that's one of the issues is we head down these narrow roads and we should have gone this way or we should have gone that. And I want to give the fire department folks that are signing up for this the latitude to make those changes. So my participant screen sharing has been disabled.
Okay, and Chief, we do need, we have a full evening tonight and we'll be finishing this up by about 5:30 and we have one item after you, so.
No, if I don't need it, then I'll share this tonight at council and we don't need to share it now, but if anybody has any questions, what we're looking for is 6 months. I priced it at 12 hours a day, 2 people, 7 days a week. I think that's gonna be best or worst case scenario, matters if you're looking at it from the financial point or the service point, but I think that that'll be a realistic cap to the program.
President Paul.
Thanks, Mayor. I have one small comment, but I will move the recommended action as recommended on civic clerk. just simply wanted to say, I've said this a few times before, but I don't get tired of saying it, so I hope you don't mind hearing it. That a lot of the inspiration that is in one of the main clauses for the drug crisis resolution that we're going to be talking about in a couple of hours came directly from Chief LaChance, and that is that we need to stop studying everything and stop extensive years of public process and get going on bold responses and new and innovative ideas. And just grateful to you, Kyle, as well, for coming forward for this, for all of you coming forward with this. Let's give it a try.
Let's give it a try.
Thank you, President Paul. Is there any other discussion? I would welcome
We have a first.
Do we?
We need a second.
Okay.
You can go with the third too.
This is great. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Chief. Thank you. See you again in a little bit. And that brings us to the other item of this special meeting, 3.2, which is a City of Burlington seasonal warming shelter project. Again, an example of which I think there are many of our responses to the current crises being very real time and action oriented. That's always been the ethic at the community stat table on our efforts for the last 6 years. This represents a expansion of, again, of the city's involvement with the issue of homelessness. This is, we go back a decade. Certainly homelessness is something we cared about and advocated, engaged in some ways, but the city's direct involvement with it was limited. That started to change in 2014 when we supported and really helped advocate, helped CVOYO start the first winter warming shelter in the city. We've had winter warming shelters every year since in some form. For most of that time, we had a winter warming shelter at almost exactly the same places we're proposing it now, right across the street, underneath in the bottom floor of the building now owned by the Turning Point Center, and where Turning Point Center operates. We had to close that location when the pandemic hit, and when it was no longer safe to house people in congregate settings like that. We kept our commitment to housing the most vulnerable members of our community, first with a facility at the North Beach Campground, and then ultimately through the purchase of the Champlain Inn. And that has operated as our winter warming shelter since the end of the pandemic. That property is going through another transition now, and will continue to house homeless individuals as a low barrier shelter, but will no longer serve as this emergency overnight shelter. And so there's a real need for this. And I want to thank Brian and Sarah Russell, our special assistant on homelessness, for responding as soon as it was clear that there was going to be this gap in services this year, starting the conversation with the state of Vermont and others to ensure that we would have this capacity. We just a few days ago received the commitment from the state for the finances necessary to open this facility, and it moved immediately to get this in front of you tonight and start communicating about this with the public, with a citywide newsletter at the end of our last week and the briefing earlier today. I know even so, it's a conversation that's moving quickly, and it is a bit of a surprise to some. It is moving quickly because the issue that was mentioned in the public forum that Sharon mentioned. We a bunch of work needs to happen at the site for this facility to be opened this winter. It's already going to be a stretch to get it ready at December 15th. Maybe Sarah or Brian, you can speak to how that date was decided upon. To keep that schedule, we need action from the council tonight. So thus the special meeting tonight and the concurrent action with the council momentarily. And I guess just speaking, I want to say again before handing it over, my confidence in this being a good location comes from that experience we had for 5 years operating a very similar facility at almost exactly this location. There were very few public complaints about the facility those years. It was generally supported by downtown stakeholders. There was generally a sense that it not only was life-saving and provided important services, but that it also was a enhancement and a support for a successful, vibrant downtown. And that's what we seek to. Again, the big change this time versus then, it really speaks to the city's deepening commitment in this area. We cannot go back to the nonprofit community and cajole, pressure, beg them again to open yet another facility. We've done that twice in the last couple of years here. It's now clear that at least for the foreseeable future, this challenge of homelessness is one that is with us and that we have to develop some additional city capacity to address. I'm grateful the state is actually funding that additional capacity with the proposal bringing to you tonight. So it's not only the payment for the shelter, this is also the creation of a new position that will take some of the responsibilities and real work pressure off Sarah in managing these facilities and get an additional staff member to take on some of those responsibilities so that Sarah's role can fulfill more of its intention of working at the systemic level to really end homelessness, not just help us respond to the most severe symptoms. So, President Paul.
My apologies, I just have a point of information, and that is that it's now 5:23. We really need to start the council meeting at 5:30. I didn't plan on giving an extensive, and don't get me wrong, I would love to hear it. We do have obviously we have this coming to the council as well, and so I'm just wondering,
We are planning the full briefing there, and I think if, I know each of you have had some additional engagement outside, so why don't, we still got 7 minutes left. It's time if there are questions, but why don't, I felt it was important to put some of that out there to kick things off. But now the floor is open if there are any questions, or when we're ready, I'm hoping there will be support for a motion. Councilor Barlow.
Thank you. And thanks for your quick work on this. I do have concerns. I expressed those to you over email. Just in my work recently, and even this afternoon when I sat in on the downtown workers public safety forum that they had at Eckers this afternoon, there's real concern that this is going to exacerbate some issues we already have in the downtown. And so I'll lay my fears on this. Are there plans to deal with some of the peripheral activity that might happen outside of the shelter? We saw the Elmwood facility when it first opened. Were there other locations like that? My last question is the money that the state granted tied to this location, or is it fungible and could be used for the
The funding is really tied to this location because we acted really quickly to identify a site. We proposed 108 Cherry Street, that location to the state, and that was denied. That was our proposal, so that was not a feasible location. We're really limited in where we have space that's being used within the city to be able to open something like this. And the budget was created and presented to AHS with some level of capital investment, specifically around cameras will be installed around the exterior of the property, and a few inside as well, and some adjustments, modifications that need to be made inside to make the space usable. So the budget is used on that location. In terms of security, as I was kind of reflecting on this, and that has been, as the mayor said, is that location that's been used for this purpose across the street, that has been used for this purpose. And one of the things that is different about this shelter is that we will have overnight security on site. Historically, the warming shelters that operated out of 179 directly across the road did not have any security presence overnight. So we will have a security guard that will be on for the duration of operations every day, in addition to two social workers who will be managing the shelter during off hours with on-call management as well.
in terms of the surrounding area? Like for instance, the parking garage, where I know they still have a needle problem in the parking garage.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's active spots that are around the city where folks are utilizing for shelter. And our hope is that by providing a safe warm space for people to be, it will draw people from some of those places that are less convenient or safe.
It's also important to note that this is actually operating as a shelter where you come and get admitted on a nightly basis. And so there's no expectation that you get to reserve a bed, which is an important aspect because it does provide shelter for those who need it, depending on their conditions, the weather, whether they have a place to stay or whether they don't have a place to stay. And it is a built-in sort of sense of, there's a built-in turnover, which in some way does alleviate that concern a little bit, we think, around, certain behaviors taking place and being kind of firmly set in stone, once you have people who are staying put for quite a while.
So I think it's important to note there have been two types. So again, when we operated winter warming shelter from essentially this location, it did not create community impacts to any great degree. There was a pandemic era community resource center daytime facility, very different operation, that there were certainly community impacts associated with that and concerns associated with that. And that is not what this is. And I think it's important to recognize that was not what this is. We have continued to fund with our emergency dollars and state dollars a community resource center that it was recently expanded. That will continue to operate. That does serve breakfast. Their expectation is that there will be numerous individuals from the overnight shelter who may well go and be part of the 2,000 people that are accessing services at the Community Resource Center. And that I think it's important to know that those operations are continuing. And I think that is a investment that is going to reduce the likelihood of there being problems in the daytime hours at the time that people are leaving the shelter in the area. If there are issues, we will do our best to address them, as we have in other shelters. I do think, from my perspective, we have overwhelming complaints and concerns being expressed about unsheltered individuals sleeping outside in encampments, in storefronts, in parking garages, on church properties. It is that those issues, which I think that very visible unsheltered presence, which is driving, from my perspective, a lot of the concern about the downtown being expressed by the public. That is not being caused by the shelters. That is being caused by a lack of capacity in the shelters, a lack of capacity in our other social services. I don't see how we can both be against, trying to act and trying to respond to the public in finding shelter for the more than 200 folks that we are documented are unsheltered currently sleeping outside. We can't. Shelters is really just about one of our only tools for addressing that. I think it is important to note that this is not the only shelter being discussed, in the sense that we do continue to advocate for the state to be running its emergency sheltering operations as well. So that's the continuation of the hotel program that we advocated strongly for and kept 2,200 people statewide. You're part of the coalition that kept 2,200 people, including a couple hundred Chittenden County residents, housed through to next April. We're going to give an update on that later tonight. And we are advocating strongly, and correct me, Sarah, if I don't get the terms quite right, but the adverse weather conditions program that the state has run in recent years, they've been non-committal about exactly what they are going to do with that this upcoming season. We are advocating for them to continue the kind of post-pandemic era periods, which would mean housing many people in Chittenden County hotels. So it is not Burlington alone that will be part of this sheltering, but we need to be part of it, and that's why we brought this forward. So we are short on time. I hope that's been a sufficient response to your question, Councilor McGee.
I'm happy to make the motion.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you, President Paul. I don't mean to cut short the debate, and we will have further discussion of it later. Sure.
We'll be available to answer questions.
We are.
At that point.
Okay.
There are other counselors who also had questions, and I'm sure you are aware of them.
If, I certainly would understand it if you were ready to vote until we had that further debate, if you wanted to abstain, that's
Happy
certainly.
to move it and have further discussion with the council.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that. So without, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And thank you, Brian and Sarah, for your work on this, and we'll see you later tonight. And with that, we have concluded the business of this special Board of Finance meeting, and without objection, we are adjourned.